You don't have to do what everybody else on YouTube is telling you to do. We're often told to use a softbox, like this one, to get the softest light possible. And yeah, it looks great, but it's not the only way of doing things. And the fact is, hard light can look really effective too, if it's done properly and in the right context. So I'm going to show you some examples of both soft light and hard light, why hard light can be more expressive than using a softbox, and some tips and techniques to make your lighting look great, whatever style you use, and so that you don't make the same mistakes everybody else does when lighting. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you the secret to controlling the mood of your videos so that you can hit the brief every time. So firstly, what's the difference between soft light and hard light, and how do you achieve both? In hard light, the shadows are very harsh and defined. Sorry. So imagine a sunny day with no clouds. The one light source is the sun. And because it's so far away, it's only actually about this big. Very bright, but very small. So in these types of conditions, you get those very harsh shadows because the sun is the only light source and it's coming from one direction. So if you want to recreate hard light, use a smaller light source with no diffusion or softbox and put it further away from your subject. Just make sure it's still bright enough. Hard light is considered as dramatic because of the extreme contrast ratios. I'm going to tell you more about those later. If you want softer light, make the light source bigger and bring it closer to your subject. If you think of this like a cloudy day, the sun is shining onto the clouds, becoming one big light source. And the clouds are dispersing that light everywhere, and obviously the clouds are a lot closer. And that's essentially what a softbox is doing. You've got the main light, which is your sun, and then the softbox, the diffusion of the softbox, is the clouds. So adding a softbox or diffusion is doing two things. One, it's making the light source bigger, because imagine just going from the spotlight to a piece of diffusion. And two, it's adding a layer of diffusion that the light is having to pass through. It's actually cutting the brightness. So if you are using a softbox, you may need to adjust the brightness to make sure that your exposure's right. The bigger and closer the light source or the softbox, the softer those shadows are going to be, because light is coming from all over and filling in those shadows. It's not coming directly from one place. So I'm using a fairly small softbox at the moment, so you can see there is a little bit of shadow and it's not super soft. If I was using a bigger one, it would be a lot softer. Just wait for that tractor to go by. Softer light tends to be more flattering because it smooths out skin imperfections and gets rid of those ugly shadows. Most people choose soft light because it's what we're told by YouTubers and professionals, to be fair, but there are so many creative things you can do with hard light, and I don't want you to miss out on them. And that's what I'm going to show you now. So when you're using a hard light source with no softbox and you add some haze, you can see those beams of light, and these can create more interest and angles, and they can also act as like leading lines towards your subject. I love this stuff. I'll leave a link in the description so you can get some yourself. Just don't do what I did with it. Now if you're after that retro star filter type look, you need to be using a really bright, hard light source. If you're using a softbox, you're gonna have to use a really powerful light to make those star patterns come out. Just using a hard light is so much easier. I use these filters that I got from Amazon. Again, I'll leave a link in the description. Super affordable, and you can also rotate the element to change which direction you want these points of the star to go. So you can either use straight or diagonal. So in this example, they're performing in kind of a theatre space. Now usually in theatres they're going to be using hard light sources with no diffusion, something like a spotlight. So if you want to recreate that type of look, then you just got to use hard lights. Another thing you can do really well with hard light sources is shape the light, and you can do this in a bunch of different ways. If you ever had a light that's got barn doors, you can make thin lines and get that effect like in the Addams Family, where Morticia has that letterbox lighting over her eyes, and it really brings out the detail. You can use a snoot to get that spotlight effect. I really like this type of look, especially in photography. It's really cool. Barn doors also control the spill of the light that's happening in your frame. So if you don't want a light to be hitting a certain wall and bouncing back, then barn doors is a great way of doing that. And then if you've ever seen light coming through blinds like this one, it gives such an interesting effect. I love it when the sun is shining through the blinds. It just looks really cool. And you can actually get modifiers to put on your light that make it look like this blind. I might get some of those actually. There's a link in the description for those as well, because I found some. Wait for this tractor to go by again. It's good living on a on a building site. When using a hard light source, you get a lot of shadows and a lot of angles. Now, sometimes, yes, this can look a little bit distracting. You know, if I'm moving and I'm casting a shadow, the viewer's focus is then switching between that movement of the shadow and me, for example. You don't always want it, but it can be really interesting and create depth because you're accentuating the differences between the bright parts of the image and dark parts of the image. Whereas using softer light, it blends in a little bit more, so you don't get that. And it can also bring out the details within the shot. And this brings me to my next point. So now that you know the difference between using a softbox and not, and how to create both different looks, which one would you choose? Let me know in the comments. The thing is, whichever one you go for, you still need to be mindful of the mood that you're trying to create. And that's why you should watch this video next, because it's going to show you how to get the exact look that you're looking for every single time you set up your lighting.